South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is urging the international community to take advantage of the 75th anniversary milestone to push ahead with reforming the UN and particularly its Security Council. The South African leader says this will give different regions of the world an equal voice. President Ramaphosa says he will use South Africa's virtual presence in New York to continue advocating for Africa to have permanent representation on the UN Security Council. Meanwhile, South Sudan is also supporting the African Union's call for 2 permanent African seats at the Council. The UN Security Council is made up of 5 permanent members, and only they have the right to veto decisions and block declarations they do not agree with. South Sudanese President Salva Kiir is among the voices calling for reform. Permanent representation in the Council will help push for African interests, especially peacekeeping missions in the region.
75 years since the founding of the United Nations, the geopolitical realities in the world have changed, and UN Security Council remains the same. This situation cannot remain the same any longer, and that is why I am adding my voice to the demand by the African Union for 2 permanent members, permanent seats in the Security Council. Africans demand this because we are the most affected by the Council's decisions and resolutions.
Well, let's get another perspective on this. I'm now joined via Skype by Professor Francis Onditi, an SRC Fellow with the African Institute in Pretoria, South Africa. Professor, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. He's also the head of the Department of the School of International Relations and Diplomacy at Riara University in Kenya. Professor, why are African leaders pushing for the 2 permanent seats? How does the continent said to benefit? Because this has been an African Union common position for some time now.
Thank you, Beatrice. I think for us to appreciate why the African countries or the leadership is pushing for the permanent membership at the United Nations Security Council, one is that, the African member state forms 28% of the United Nations membership. That is not a small number, especially considering that the UN itself has grown tremendously from just 51 members at the time of formation in 1940s to about 193. That's about 73% increment. It's not a small thing. It's significant really in terms of membership, but also in terms of contribution to peace and security. But another thing that is important why membership of the United Nations should be, should comprise the African state. We know that majority of conflicts that have happened in Africa are actually, or in the world, majority are from Africa. Actually, more than 50% of conflicts globally, in the past decades, have actually originated from Africa. So I think they have a very good justification. It might be a bit ambitious to have 2 permanent membership, but I think it is something which is rhyming very positively with the status of peace and security on the continent. But also, we should not forget that Africa has come of age. It has grown in terms of quiet diplomacy, right. But we also know that,
So, Professor, 2 questions come to mind here, because you have mentioned that there's probably a good justification for Africa to ask for permanent seats at the Security Council. First of all, what is the likelihood of this happening? And second of all, we had leaders at the UN General Assembly debate talking about solidarity and reaffirming support for multilateralism. Are we likely to see far-reaching reforms in the UN, though, in the near future?
Thank you, Beatrice. I think it's important we appreciate that, the membership, permanent membership to the United Nations, it has a lot to do with, strategic decision-making that members do you know, while they are at the, you know, the United Nations General Assembly. Now, why would we want to think that there will be reform or changes when the African states increase or rather have their permanent membership at the UN Council? I think you could look at a number of things, but one of the things that comes to my mind is that already what we call the A3s, you know, who are already members of the, you know, the Security Council from Africa. They have made a tremendous, you know, contribution already to the peace and security architecture, not just of Africa, but also, you know, globally. And so building on those contributions of the A3 bloc, I think having permanent membership at the UNG, it would be something that, you know, all countries would benefit from. But I think in terms of reforms, we would say this. If you look at the multilateralism, or rather, you know, the multipolar dimensions that the world is now going through, it's only Africa which can resolve what you could call the geopolitical deadlock that countries are experiencing. You look at US versus China, and many others. It's only Africa coming into the equation that would be in a position to resolve those economic and geopolitical you know, deadlock that the countries have experienced. And so it is something that I think many African countries and even beyond would support positively to the realization of peace and security globally.
Professor Francis Onditi joining us there via Skype. Thank you for your insights.